What's going on, man? No, did you go to work today? How was it? Your foot got better? That's why you can't leave razor blades on the rugs, man. You in the game? I'm almost at the lobby. About what? Nautica? No, what is that? Yeah, okay. I didn't hear anything about it yet. Yeah. That was one game I bought. I bought a game and then it was on Game Pass like a month later. I don't do duos. I didn't do duos yet. Hmm.
So I like to have a little fun, so what? This is my favorite part.
This is your champion.
Don't worry about my legs getting tired. I made sure that would never happen again.
I'm your jump master. I won't let you down, except by falling.
Were we flying?
Master here.
It's fun to zip line. You should try it.
I got it. Fucking, there was some error with, Pandora and it made me, like, re-log in.
This might be a good place to
But the
land.
logins from, like, when I used to work at AT&T, like, 8 years ago. So, the email, pretty sure I knew that. The password, I wasn't sure. It took me a couple tries.
How about this way?
I'm gonna land in the second floor down. Is that you making noise or somebody else? Okay.
Attention. First blood.
First blood, and it's not us.
Yeah.
Round one.
Got a Wang Mang and a
The
Mozam.
next ring is quite far.
Longbow here.
Backpack here. Level 1.
Oh yeah. I could use one of them and a hat. Two.
How about
Over here.
Optics here. Sniper.
Yeah, I got a Havoc. You have a hat? No.
Prowler SMG here.
I just found a flatline
Backpack
on the
here.
bottom floor.
Level 2.
Damn, what kind of bag you got? You're giving up level 2 backpacks. Are we hearing people? Yes.
Firing. Target's right.
I almost downed one, and the other one's right here.
I got a bad guy.
No, they... Well, on the second floor, yeah. No, I waited on the steps because I heard them, and then they came up. But they were right next to each other, so it was 2 on 1. Damn, what kind of vest did they have? I did 219 and you did 90 something, right? That's like 300 damage. It's like over 300. They must have had better vests, I guess. Yeah, but I'm saying like that's over 300 damage, so they must have, one of them had that better than a white vest, is what I'm saying. Or else they both would have been down.
Alright, let's do this. It'll be fun. And if not, well, we all make bad choices. You live, you learn, life goes on.
They might have swapped my shield out.
This is your champion.
Remember me, friends. I may kill you.
Just a thought, we can land here. Follow the leader.
Oh, wow. Yeah, he's always unsure about where he pings. Just a thought. We can go over here. Or not. I'm just saying. I was reading online. Apparently, a lot of people think Mirage is like one of the worst characters in the game. Apparently, people are saying some people actually leave if somebody picks Mirage just because they feel like he's garbage.
Backpack here. Level 2.
Yeah. He doesn't
Yeah, I could use that.
really bring anything to the team, but I feel like he's a pretty good damage dealer. Or, you know, his ultimate's pretty sweet if you can use it right. Sometimes, even if you know how to use it, like I feel like I know how to use it, and I still get fucked up a lot.
Gotta hop up here.
The turbocharger and some energy ammo. There's a Havoc around here somewhere.
First blood.
Yeah, now we're talking. Let's do this.
I need it.
R99 here. Havoc here.
I could use that.
Because they can do stuff for their team.
Attention. There is a new kill leader.
Keep eyes on the new kill leader.
R301 here.
Sniper
Sniper stock here.
charge rifle in here too, and another 99. More light ammos.
Some champion, huh?
Oh, is there stuff above here?
Heavy ammo here. 1 minute before the ring
I could use
closes.
that.
We have time.
Is that Daniel the whole time? Did I miss that? Yeah.
45 seconds. Ring's not too far. I'm okay with that.
Opie
Only 30 seconds
Meister.
left on the clock. The ring's close.
Yeah, I took Sam for a walk today, and he was just like, I haven't taken him for a walk in a couple months. My brother has that, but like he was just like choking himself the whole fucking time, like. Well, mostly in the beginning. But yeah, it's like,
Phoenix Kid here.
it's like, why would you keep doing this? Isn't it annoying to you?
Level 1.
Wake up. Yeah, I could use that. New kill leader. Soon to be me. Optics here. Sniper.
Damn, through the leaves.
Attention. Delivering
Might be
care
something good
package.
there. Check it out. Care package coming in.
Mannerless dog. This shit look looted? Yeah.
Open supply bin over there. Extended energy mag. Gotta hop up here.
Yeah, right. Nice. Did you open it? Oh, it's that way. I was gonna say, I didn't see the beam. I thought it was the other way.
Shotgun bolt here.
Oh
Level
shit!
3.
I think I'm getting shot at. I don't know. I heard a loud ass thud on the ground.
Knockdown shield here. Level 2.
But I don't know. You didn't shoot a gun, did you? It just sounded like a real loud thud to the ground. So I don't. It was weird. It happened when I was like right here.
Knockdown shield here. Level 2.
Countdown.
Damn, I don't have any optics yet. Oh, maybe that's what it was. Yeah, it was when I grabbed the knockdown
Barrel
shield.
stabilizer here. Level 2.
So maybe that's what it was.
Gotta hop up here. Hammer point. Go bamboozle.
Some beans. There's a 3x, bitch. More heavy and light. I just need optics. Do you want to shoot that thing?
Cargo bot here. I've heard they carry cargo. Shot a cargo bot.
Ah.
Friends.
Start shooting it early so I could get it when it was gold.
Hostile spotted.
Extended light mag here.
Blue light mag, if you need it.
Hostile spotted.
You want to go creep on him?
Hostile spotted.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I saw them. That last ping. Come on, you say. You could do it, you say. Appear in this little shack. Did you just open something? Because I just heard something. Oh my god, yeah. Alright, Sam, like, you could do it, you say. Appear in this shack. Guess what I just found in this shack? A Phoenix kit. No, it was you say, yeah.
Might be something good this way.
I'm hearing somebody.
Got one here. Shots fired, and they're hitting me.
Did 60 to him.
Faking him out with a decoy. Reloading.
Hostile over there.
Care package being delivered.
I bet that care package has some stuff here for us. Reloading.
Did like 100 to that dude.
Using the decoy escape.
Throwing thermite grenade.
Reloading.
Enemy down.
Alright, killed an enemy.
Yeah. I finished them off for you. Yeah, that dude's back here somewhere.
Yeah, I'm getting shot at.
Shit, yeah.
Squad.
Yeah, they're trying to fight us, so... I'm gonna retreat and heal up a little bit back here. Before I check these boxes.
Fire, friends. Here I go.
What was in there? Anything cool?
Recharging shield.
Oh, we're getting sniped from the opposite side now. Shit.
You got bamboozled.
Target spotted.
Give him my shield to recharge.
Round 3. Beginning countdown.
Great. Already inside the ring.
Might be hearing somebody over here. Thought somebody was shooting us from over here.
Target
It's
spotted.
not.
Attention. There is
Alright,
a
then I'm
new
gonna go
kill
check in
leader.
this box.
Keep eyes on the
Ooh. Big ass heavy mag. Ooh, another use site. Fuck yeah. Phoenix kit. There's a care package. I'm going for it. Been here for a little while.
Might be
You
something
see what
good
it is?
there.
You only have 6 Kraber shots. Big med kit, L-Star.
Optics here.
dropship
Mid-range.
coming in.
Sight.
That could be good or bad.
Right.
Target over
ooh,
there. Target
Here?
over there.
Oh shit. You wanna push on it? Where's it dropping them?
Got one.
Somebody's back there. They're both over there.
Get ready. It's
They're gonna go in that
time.
building, probably.
Throwing through my grenade.
Great. The ring is close. Less than a minute.
They're not inside.
Only 30 seconds left on the clock. The ring's close.
Looking underneath. I don't see them. I don't know where the fuck they went. Unless they're hiding somewhere.
sensors on that spot.
What is that smell? Oh well.
Incoming care packet. Enemy spotted.
Nice.
Reloading.
There. Oh, there's another care package. You want to go check it out? If one of us gets a gold vest or something, or maybe more Kraber bullets for you. Oh, it didn't land yet? Oh, it's about to land.
Go out and bamboozle 'em.
I don't think anybody's even close. I think we're good. Shield battery,
Extended
purple,
energy
energy,
Level 3.
gold bag. You want the gold bag? What is it? Oh, it's the Guardian Angel one. Oh. I'm hearing somebody.
There's one right here.
Hostile close. 1 minute. The ring isn't far.
Which way? Up.
Got one spotted.
They just jumped over that, both of them. They're still up here. Oh, no, that's you.
Only 2 enemy squads remain. I love it.
Enemy trap spotted.
I never saw this hole before. There's like a hole with a zip line. It's like a well.
Lucky us, we are already inside the ring.
Is there a thing in that tower? Is it in the circle or no?
Might be something good this way.
All right. So I'm gonna.
Shooting at me.
I'm.
Going through my grenade. Threw my grenade out.
Run towards me. See. Alright. Mess on the concentration. Oh yeah, and fucking destroying shit. No. I just noticed Zero sent us a message on our group thread. For some reason, I don't get notifications for it. But if I go in and look, then I see it. Do you get notifications for it? Yeah, I definitely don't get it. It's like every time. Like the last time, I said something that you said in the group message not to say, but because I didn't get a message for the group message, notification for it. Oh, that's what it was. I got a notification when you put me in the group, and I was like, "What is this group you're putting me in?" That's what it was.
Extravagant, that's the word.
Excellent. Time to destroy more opponents.
Ain't took no shit.
This is your champion.
It's the season opening. It's really fun to do stuff.
Alright, let's do a good old
might be a good place to land,
American
but what do I
train
know?
yard drop. I'll hit the back left.
Never mind, sorry. Just a thought we could land here. This is the best part.
Well, could be like in Australia. Oh, you're not landing in the top cart? Oh, great.
Frag out.
Let's go this way.
Start not fired and it hit me. Frag out.
Attention.
Firing.
Woo, bitch!
Alright, enemy down.
Came in the wrong cart, didn't you? They just called off. That was sweet.
Already in the
I
next
threw a
ring.
grenade on my way in,
It smells kind of like
so
shots fired, and they're hitting me.
their teammate's almost dead right here.
There's one right here.
Reloading.
The
We
Birdman.
killed the last member. Good work, team.
They're getting their teammate up.
There's one right
They're behind the cart, right there. They got him up. One jumped off.
Reloading. Enemy down.
Behind, jump off there is the other one. They might be healing by now, but you're full health.
Reloading. We killed the last member. Good work, team. Don't worry, I'm here.
Not much. How's it going?
I guess I owe you dinner now.
No, you.
Better be clipping.
One sec, healing up.
You clipping, bro?
Fool.
So you take out that other first squad that you were fighting first or something?
Yo, you better record that before it's too late. Oh, you can still go over your whole stream or whatever. You just have to know when to look. Woo wee! Got a little apple brandy. That shit is strong.
Is that what you got from out of town?
Oh, I got it on the way. I was just visiting my nephew. My sister that lives in Maine went to Mexico and brought me back a couple of souvenirs and sent them home with my other sister who was visiting her when she got back. So, so I was meeting my
nice.
nephew and sister to pick them up. She got me this shirt and a key holder thing to hang your keys on. Yeah, you know, it's like a Mexican Hawaiian shirt.
Oh
Yeah.
shit! I thought I was hearing somebody.
God bamboozled. Look at you. Recharging shields.
See right where my thing is. Oh goddamn! Instant death.
Grappling.
Make memories.
Yeah, they suck.
Care package being delivered.
If I have at least a select fire on there, at least it doesn't kick up every burst, so it's not as bad. Oh, you ready to play, Zero?
Oh yeah, yeah. Thought you guys were still in the
Okay.
game.
Yeah, we just died.
Ooh,
gotta
I didn't
change
mean to
a few
invite you.
duos.
I was trying to push join.
There we go.
Nobody up in your Twitch chat even telling you where the new clip button is.
Oh, so it's different?
Trust nature. Then trust yourself. Not gonna lie, I'm pretty good at this. Okay, I do lie, but not
Oh
this
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Let's have fun, friend.
This is your champion.
It's the season opening. It's really fun to do stuff. Awesome. I'm the jump master.
Not even worth the chalk to tally.
This might be a good place to land. Here we go. It's a long drop. Fun.
Something good there.
My face is playing games, bro. I got my game face
Dude,
on.
Joe, that thing a director uses is called a clapperboard. I had to look that shit up. You had me curious. Beating this fool to death.
I got your back,
Shit, I'm
bro.
I had to run because the guy started shooting me. I'm looking for a gun.
Opening fire. Got one here.
Maybe I don't got your back, bro. There's- yeah.
I had your
Everybody
back,
just
bro.
came here. Fuck.
Yeah, I couldn't find a gun. Well, I could have probably found a gun if I hadn't tried to duke it out, but yeah, dude, there were a shitload of people there.
Contact.
Well, yeah. Those factors had to contribute.
Then we landed a little late.
Contact with hostile. Hostile close. Contact with target. Hostile right here. Never mind. Contact with target.
That's what it
This
looks
is on
like
your.
on your feed. It cuts off the ends, like on Facebook.
Ah.
So you can't see the health. You didn't notice that? Oh, on your TV screen. Oh, what? Oh shit.
Is
Wait,
that's
so
not the
you
usual
have
way,
your
right?
TV coming from your computer, not from your Xbox, right? From the Xbox, your computer to your TV, though, right? So maybe your computer settings are doing something.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
it's just a pass through. Oh, and it
Oh,
just
your
copies the
Elgato
signal.
thing?
Oh, okay.
I was created.
Oh, so it doesn't come out of your computer into your TV. It just goes through the box back into the TV, and then splits off.
Make this look good.
It's like a splitter, basically. Okay.
His face. Come on, you see it?
I bet you need to turn your Elgato off and back on again.
It's still like that? It didn't change yet?
This is your champion.
Anyone want to take me out? Come find me. I'll buy the drinks.
Giving up is no thing I would do.
All right, I'm gonna give it another chance on that old Trizzy yard there.
Yeah, I drop there every time. I love it. You guys landing in hanging boxes or what?
I'm going to try for that one.
All right, now I'll go to the other one. You not like dropping there anymore, Joe? Basically, as long as your dot is in there, you should have it.
I didn't get a gun.
Throwing out the stuff. Getting hurt over here.
Oh, I just got punched off. I dare you to jump off. You bitch.
Enemy down.
I'm coming to you.
Enemy killed. I took care of it. Don't worry.
We got him around us, boys.
Did you pulse or was that somebody else?
That's me. That's me.
Okay, yeah, I only got 28 bullets and one gun.
Got one here.
Over there. I'm chasing them. You guys coming?
Yeah, just slightly behind you, Grimp. Right with you now.
Using grapple.
Yeah, they're up top, and then Gibraltar's back in this way.
There he is.
Reloading. Give him my shield to recharge. Get out there and make
Anybody got any heals? Never mind.
I need some light ammo.
Oh, what?
There's shield
Oh
cells
my
in there.
god, I was almost back in the shield.
Oh man, I'm getting shot from every fucking direction. God damn, the whole squad's over to the side there.
here, right in front of me.
The enemies are shooting at me.
There's a lifeline creeper on you.
In front of me.
Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, Spider-Man
Damn.
with your skate moves.
Are you hidden, Grim?
No, I'm just gonna. If
Okay.
you're still running through there, I'm just gonna crawl that way, Joe. Like,
Take that back.
Yeah.
well, I mean, there's like at least 5 people over here, so you might.
Yeah, I
wanna
didn't
just go
know if
around.
you
Take my
were
box up if
recruited.
you want to do that.
Oh, damn. No.
There's literally like 5 people coming after you.
Oh, no. Oh,
Not today.
fucked by the grapple.
Heavy ammo here.
Hell yeah.
Enemy over there.
Hmm. Maybe if you jiggle the cable.
Huh.
Oh,
weird.
just the stat card, so it's like the application doing it. Ah. Yeah, you might have
Yeah,
to
maybe
reset
maybe it is
Apex.
that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, heck, it seems like in the earlier versions of Apex, I was all the time having to quit it and restart it because it was some stupid little bug.
Yeah. Yeah, you know it's a funny bug that I don't know. I just started seeing clips about it, so I don't know if it was with duos, but when people would like launch out of the ship, they'd be down, and they would just like fall through, looking all funny, and then they hit the ground and be down. Oh, also, somebody took a screenshot that while they were in the ship, it said, like, you know, in the top right, it shows, like, the damage you do. They did 30 melee damage in the ship. And remember, just, what was it, yesterday or the day before, I told you I heard a punch noise while I was in the ship, because I hit the punch button by accident.
So ready for this. I am
Yeah.
extremely ready for this. Are we ready?
I was
So
created for
maybe
this.
we'll have to try that. See if we can, like, fight people in the ship without seeing them.
Dude, that's crazy. I never even thought of the ship as actually containing the players until, you know, I thought it was just like a camera thing until you jumped out of it, you know?
Yeah, you wouldn't think you really exist in there, but apparently you do.
Right.
And you can meet people. Sometimes, I guess.
Except by falling.
Science is
All right,
for
so let's
science.
switch it up.
Hey, maybe we land
As
here.
am
Or
I.
maybe we don't. Fine with whatever. You better not come back to haunt me. And I hate when that happens. Yep.
Hold your breath if you have to breathe.
Oh, I forgot to try it. Already that fast, I forgot about it. You going? Where are you going? All the way to the circle? One of these buildings? What?
I'm going to this one, I guess.
I'm going inside. You got a super cool guy bag.
Hell
Purple as
yeah.
Shit. There's a Mozambique in here.
Check out RE45 here.
RE45, a bag, energy ammo.
Also, energy ammo over here if one of you gets one.
Oh boy.
Oh, I'm pretty far from y'all. I'm coming to you, though.
First blood on the enemy. Enemy spotted.
You want to go get some? I'm down.
All right.
Let's go get some. Ah, yes. Come on, Arcstar.
Throwing Arc Star.
Oh, I see
Do
him,
your
yep.
thing, Arcstar. Oh, he ran away already. Up top.
All right. Dude ran inside.
Alright.
Get it, get it. Oh, goddamn. This kid killed me.
Enemy taken down.
He's killing you.
Dude, he ran-
Alright,
he-
shit, I'm
Let's not
coming.
die.
He ran up the stairs. I don't know how he fucking killed
Maybe
me.
I
I gotta
should
look
finish
at
that
that.
dude off so his teammate doesn't.
Go bamboos.
Oh, there's a vest in here. I'm gonna pick it up.
Picked up our friend's banner. We can bring him back.
I hear him healing. He was just out back. There he goes, running away.
Making contact here.
Alright. While he's gone, I'm gonna make sure the other dude's dead so his teammates can't res him. Oh, his teammate's going for him.
Might be something good there.
I got him.
Shots fired and it hit me. Firing.
Man, I ran out of ammo. I had to fake it with the fucking wingman.
1 minute. The ring is far.
Two guys, two guys.
All I got left
Nice
is
job,
wingman. Fuck. And I can't heal myself.
I got
Alright,
a RE45
I'm gonna hit this
on
box
my
for
body.
ammos.
Ring's a little far.
Alright, I found some ammo. I got steel cells. Fuck.
You were doing great though, Joe. That was some good prowler shooting a minute ago there.
Sending out my
damn how many squads want to be up in here.
God damn. That's a lot of motherfuckers.
Hell yeah.
Oh, yo, my shit's the same way now.
Yeah.
My
I got some bad guys
3-player cards are shifted to the right, so zeros is
Really?
like cut in half. Yeah.
That's fucked up.
Man, why are you infecting my Xbox, Joe? What's going on here? You give me viruses?
I told my family tonight about that story Grim told about the woman smearing the booger on her teeth.
Oh
They
man.
were grossed out.
Oh
My
God.
nephew
was it?
said like maybe it prevented her from getting cavities, like it formed a coating.
Ah. Yeah, it was fucked up. It was fucked up.
poor lady Sensodyne. Definitely.
We will defeat all of our enemies.
Yeah, that's about as bad as 2 girls, 1 cup or something. I mean,
Our path is made today.
as a matter of fact, I would say if you're smearing boogers on your teeth, you probably like a little bit of this brown soft serve too.
This face. I mean, come on.
Dad?
Introducing your champion.
Yes, cray.
Oh shit, let's see. Where is... Oh, there is the tree. I need to go to the tree for knockdowns. You
So,
know, I don't
actually,
think anybody's going to be
There's actually a
jumping
place
there.
called The Tree.
Yeah, it's that big leaf.
That's a leaf,
Let's go
not
to
a
the
tree.
geyser.
Oh, we're not going to the
Yeah.
tree?
No, I don't
Alright.
think anybody will land there with us. Yeah, me too. It's an old one. Yeah. I think I've got to do all 5 of them.
Oh, someone got the party started.
Beginning ring countdown.
Wow. Come on, bro. If I pick up another Arc Star and not a real gun.
Yeah, I ain't got nothing but
Fire, friends.
shit.
Alright, if you can give me a second. No, don't tell me this whole ass building has no gun. I have 4 Arc Stars. I'll come and just tell him your boy is not ready yet. Okay.
Oh, there's a dude on the roof, Joe.
Did you run past the gun?
Using grapples.
Tell him, Joe. Tell him anytime. Can you spare like a box? Yeah, I got the Mozambique. Can you spare like a box of light ammo? Where were they, on the
Yeah,
other
they
side?
apparently went to that building. They're probably all the way through it though.
Light ammo here. Giving my shields a recharge.
Someone's got to take out the new kill leader. They're too cocky. Yeah, get
Let's go
shot at.
this way.
Shit.
I hit him with the Arc Star.
Throw an arc star.
Cannon,
Give him my shield to recharge.
doing big things around
Throw
here.
a decoy. I am taking fire. Reloading.
I broke his shield.
Shot at.
What the fuck? Where am I getting hit from?
Yeah, I messed him up.
Alright.
65 to the one. The other one I fucked up a lot.
Oh, he
They're
fucked
all
me up.
should almost be dead. And this bitch
They're
is
both
finishing
on
me on
me.
the roof. Anybody have a shot on her? There you
We're
go.
all dead meat.
Nice.
Well, Joe's not dead meat.
Nice.
2 guys coming out of the building, Joe, where I
2
got.
coming out of the building? They got the 2
Yeah.
boxer up.
1 minute before you close.
He's almost. He should be like one shot. He got to heal up.
I think you just knocked his shield. He should go down. Oh, that little fucker.
I hit him with an arc star and then shot him with some bullets.
Oh. Wang mang.
Number 2.
Wow, that's all the damage I did to that fucking P2020 piece of shit.
Damn, that can't be right. 100. Nah. 65. Yeah, that shit done that up. I 100% hit him with an arc star. I have the footage of that.
Mm-hmm.
And the last dude in my death recap, what I shot, and then I shot the Gibraltar a little bit from behind, but then switched on the other person who crept on me, and to them I did 65, 11, 18, and 9.
Damn it.
I need to record that. I definitely hit the motherfucker with an arc star. How did it? And it said 30 when I hit him with it. But how would it not do more than that? So do you think if I hit his shield with an arc star but keep his shield out, he doesn't do any more damage? You think that's possible? $75. But then still, 30 and then an exploding arc star on half of that
Yeah.
not even do more than, you know.
I wonder
don't know,
if
I'll
it just
throw out
like
the footage,
negates
see
it.
if more. No, when I threw it, it did 30 damage, and it looked like it was going to hit him when I threw it, and then it did. At least it looked like it did, and it said 30 damage. You needed to go to the tree? We can go there.
Maybe we land here. Or maybe we don't. I'm fine.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, maybe somebody will land this time.
We'll land in
Never
this,
mind, sorry.
this little door here.
Something good there.
I'm all lagging.
There's a damn...
Alright. Let's see if I'm a cool guy with a peacekeeper.
Yeah, yeah.
Probably not. You know what? I found the real gun. I'm giving up on that dream.
Oh, somebody's in here with me. Oh, goddamn. Grim, other room.
Coming.
Sending out my decoy.
Yo, my shit's like jumping rubber banding. That's retarded, dude. Fuck. I should clip that too. I start shooting dude, and then he just 10 feet to the side. Motherfucker.
I almost wanted to die so I could see how the hell that bitch killed me that quick. What? Dude, I'm convinced there are some kids using aimbots. That is fucking bullshit, dude. There ain't no fucking way every one of these kids that has an R99 has a goddamn purple barrel stabilizer. That kid hit me from across the room with 10 hits from the R99 in a half second, and I was dead from 150, dude. He hit me for 158 damage from across the fucking room.
Yeah. Damn.
I don't know.
Did you kill?
I don't know.
Did you kill that Mirage, Joe? Is it choppy for you too, Joe? Your screen's mad choppy for me. You know what? I did. I did never reset my router like I was going to before. Because if it doesn't look like that for you, but it looks like that for me watching you, it must be my shit.
Now, it's choppy for me spectating him, but my game
Yeah.
doesn't feel choppy right now when I'm playing.
Only 1 minute until the ring closes.
It's
Luckily, it's not far.
maybe I
mad
need to,
rubber
too.
banding. It's like worse watching him than it was for me playing.
Ring's not that far. I love
You
it
know,
when
if
that
if you're
happens.
going to reset yours after this game, I'll just do mine too, because
Yeah, I'm gonna do
I
that.
mean, the
and then while I
99,
smoke. 'Cause,
you
yeah,
can
that
never
shit is
tell with the
ridiculous.
99 if it's legit or not, because like it can legit just rape you in a quarter second. But when they're far away from you, though, when they're like,
It's a lot
you
harder.
know, yeah, and it just seems like it's unlikely that.
Just 10 seconds. Tick-tock, says the clock.
I think I saw somebody on the roof there. Yeah.
And fire, friends.
Check out over there. Hidey tough. Getting shot at.
I'm running in the building trying to get some guns. I'm a dead
Yeah,
man.
I'm
God
see it.
damn,
I'm
these
going
kids.
in here.
Oh, god damn, here. I broke this. Oh, no, I'm dead. Never mind.
Ah, you know what? My game clip was fucking uploading the Xbox fucking live.
You got a whole squad hunting you, Grim, or they will in a minute. Yep, they're hunting you. You might as well move.
That's probably what it was. It was updating that clip I just made.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
why I was
yeah.
all fucked up. I didn't even think of that. I'll see if I can recover your banners.
There's a whole squad over there.
Kill leader appointed.
Are you a fake ass follower? I need your bullets, sorry. Oh, a hat. Did you have a hat? I mean... Don't look at me. Don't look at me.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna just reset all my shit. It'll just take like 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that too.
Energy mag here.
All right, I'll be back in just a minute.
Alright.
Sweden
Yeah, I
this
should
last
probably
40
reset my
minutes.
Xbox too, and maybe it'll fix that car.
Yeah, I'm gonna
thing,
do that.
too. Yeah, I'll redo everything. Alright, I'll be back in a little bit.
I'm just waiting this 40 minutes till I can download Bless. Yeah, download it. Download it be like just before you get off, or when you get off, or something.
Yeah. Download it while I sleep.
Yeah.
I
Good
gotta,
idea.
gotta see where kids is free. Why are you using wireless? Come on, what's happening? Make you happy when I touch you? That's a no-no.
Oh shit, where'd Zero go? That's name Pacific. That's 1 p.m. Eastern, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it could be worse. What's up, Zero?
I didn't even hear you say anything. Oh,
And I'm like,
I
hey,
must have.
Zero?
I must have said hey like before I was really in the party.
Oh,
I was
well
like,
then.
I said hey, and I didn't hear anything. I didn't know you guys were giving me a fanfare and shit. Thanks.
Oh my god, I just want this to freaking. Oh, I'm not even to be able to play. It's just I want to download it.
Are you in the game, Joe?
Yeah.
It's showing you as just online store. Is it gonna be a minute before you're ready? Okay.
Last
Yeah.
you can download
Yeah,
What? Anybody can? It's an open beta.
it's an open beta. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
1 p.m. Eastern. Yeah.
Yeah, I may download it. I don't know. I mean, I doubt I'll have time for an MMO, but I might play it a minute or two. I don't know. If I got the room, I'll probably download it anyway.
It's like 20 gigabytes.
Oh, that's not bad. I'm pretty sure I've got that.
I think I looked at it's 21 gigabytes or something like that.
I was expecting way bigger than that.
Yeah, well,
Is it a
whether or
pretty
not the
big
full
world?
game. Oh, yeah,
yeah,
it's a
I
pretty
got
big
you.
world.
Full game might be more.
Yeah, the
shits.
full game might be more, but it's 21 gigabytes. The beta. It's gonna let us go up to level 30, because last time it was up to level 20. It's gonna let us go up to level 30 this time. A whole bunch of other stuff. It's like,
Good luck, have fun, don't die.
This is your champion.
oh,
Follow my path.
well, I'm gonna have to re-download it. I'm gonna have to re-download it. I thought that I had to delete it, so I deleted it earlier today.
By falling.
But yeah, that's good.
How about here? Okay, never mind.
This might be a good place to land. Look at that.
Oh, I don't care. I thought that was you that pinged that.
Here we go. It's a long drop. Fun.
Is Blessed going to be a free to play, or is it going to be
Yeah.
a regular? Oh, okay.
Free to play. With a cash shop, so like it's free to play, but you can buy like cosmetics and stuff like that,
Yeah.
like mounts and all that kind of stuff in the shop. So you can pay real money to buy that kind of stuff. But yeah,
Beginning ring countdown.
Sailor Moon mage robes.
The next ring is far.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Whatever you like, right? No. I'm just playing.
I mean, this is a normal thing.
Yeah, yeah.
MMOs are like my favorite kind of game, but it's pretty tight. They made a lot of changes to it and stuff. They changed. Oh, one of the things, Joe, which is interesting, is there's a different fighting. There's three different button layouts now to the fighting style. So, they found that the last time using all of the face buttons was kind of difficult. So they remapped one of one of the like two different controller layouts to see which one people find is the most friendly, I guess, for us to use. So last time, like most of your fighting moves, like while you were doing your attack rotations and everything, it was all upon A B, um, like A B, Y, and X, right? But but they said that like a lot of people said it's kind of hard to use A B Y and X constantly when you're fighting when you're also trying to use the right analog stick as well at the same time to change your camera angles and all that kind of stuff as well, right? To change your camera angles and stuff to using that right analog stick. So they remapped it to allow one of the button layouts is to use your for certain things the XYBA will be used, but the majority of your attacks will be remapped to either right bumper, right trigger, or the other button layout is to get rid of the using of face attacks and change it to your triggers. So whether or not using your left trigger and right trigger, or using your right bumper and right trigger.
I hear somebody, guys, around this building. Yeah, he's outside the back. He's outside the back. He threw
I'm
a
not
funny
too
stick
sure.
up.
I'm not too sure which one
Shit,
I
there's
think
two
is
of them.
going to be the best, but
Shit. He's down here. Two of them. Shit, I'm a moron. Shit.
I have been down.
20 to that left
I'll tell you what. I get killed by the R99 like way too often.
Yeah.
Yeah, the same thing. That happened to me, I believe. Same two guys.
Hold on, I'm watching this video real quick. So I 100% do the arc star and got an instant 30 something. Must have hit him. Okay, alright. I'll be able to join in like 5 seconds.
Okay.
Alright. I'm running now. Throw it. Bang. Yeah, I hit him for 30 damage. But then when it exploded, it didn't do any more damage, as far as I could tell. I ran forward, so it kind of went off screen. Alright, let me see. Invites.
Yeah, switching it to rank. That'll we'll get our shit going. After you got off last night, Joe, Grim had the idea to, drop in some hot zones so it was all or nothing, and we did pretty decent. Like one game
Yeah,
we got
we were
some
getting
really
positive.
good points, and then another couple of games we really didn't lose too much. I don't think,
I'm still 46 above.
She got.
I got it, Ben. I got it.
But the developer said something pretty cool this morning, Joe, when people were asking on the forums about the Blessa, about what their plans were after Blessa's launched and everything. One of the topics that they said is, oh, like what about like another class, right? After the game comes out, like is there any ideas for that? And they said once the game is launched, that will be one of their primary one of their primary goals is to put out a sixth class for the game. So people are like, after Bless saying that exact like that confirmation, people are like, it's probably going to be another like melee class, because there's 3 technically ranged classes, right, with the priest, the mage, and the archer, but there's only the crusader and the berserker. So a lot of people are thinking maybe like a rogue, or an assassin or something like that. Which would be kind of cool too. Yeah.
We're going the first slit and to the left.
Me too, to the right.
Oh, somebody over there? Shit.
Yep. She's running out the back door.
Coming.
Beginning ring countdown.
Sending out my decoy.
Oh shit, I'm getting shot in the back. Oh, that's not nice.
First blood.
It's not us. Wonderful.
The teammate's probably gonna come into the door that we came from. I hear them.
With you.
Reloading.
I think they're in the building.
Got a bad guy.
Yeah, they are.
Marking our surroundings.
You see him?
Damn, where's he at? I don't see him.
Kill leader.
Okay.
Oh, well.
Fire, friends.
Shit, I'm coming. Wait, they're on the bottom, right?
Oh shit.
I'm sorry, but you could have killed my friends.
Fuck, man.
Fuck.
Yeah.
goddamn. I didn't even hear. I thought, like, I knew they were there, but I thought I could have got you up before they were. I didn't expect them at the top of the stairs.
Yeah, I misunderstood. When I heard they were below us, I thought below us, because we were on the roof, I thought like inside the building, so I jumped
Yeah, me too.
inside and got
But-
there
but-
super late.
It was weird. It was messing with me where it was showing go like through the fucking wall. Like I thought he was in another room instead of outside, right next to the building.
I didn't even see the, what is that called? The radar shit? The pulse? I didn't even see the
Yeah, I
pulse.
don't even know.
Bum, 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 bum.
Introducing your champion.
You know what's scary? Not having Lifeline by your side.
Space 420 cookies. Yeah.
Oh shit.
I'm trying to punch people. It's not working.
The tree, the hot zone. Get my
Are we
take
landing on
downs.
top of the leaf? You want to go in the building? So we can land close?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we can land on top of the leaf. I'm cool with that, too.
Yeah. Well, I gotta go. I think these buildings are within the leaf zone and the rot ones aren't.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna. Oh well, it doesn't even matter as long as I get
Alright,
knocked
I'm gonna
out.
hit right here. Hopefully we can all find a gun real quick.
Here's an
triple take, that ain't
RE45 or a
cool.
2020 rather.
Oh,
another
come on,
gun in
triple
here.
take longbow.
Big 2020.
Up. Alright, I
There's a
got
dude
all
on my
names.
roof.
I'm coming.
No, he's finally got a goddamn kill. I mean, sweet. There's another dude in here. I'm running so I don't fucking die. There's another one upstairs, I think. It's on the roof or right outside. Yep. Right on the balcony. He's executing me. He's executing me. Fucking kill him.
Alright.
Kill his ass.
Oh, there's a box here.
Got our friend's banner. This is great.
I got the kill. Sorry. I didn't mean it. There's a U sight in there. I have a double tap, if that helps. So is that your box? Their box disappeared? Okay.
Yeah. My
Oh,
purple
no,
one.
it's on
Yeah.
the ground.
The purple one's me.
Alright. I'm gonna go bring you back, Mr. Zero.
There's, yeah, that one you're going towards closer. Yeah.
I feel like I just heard something. I don't know. What that was. Maybe it was me. I don't know. So there should be at least 2 more guys around here because we killed his teammate, right?
Well,
this is
at
the
least
building
one
I
more.
started at.
We killed 2.
Oh, we
Where-
killed 2?
Where did we come from? Okay, thanks.
Ah, that's right.
Thanks, sir.
The ring is a far distance. 1 minute remains.
Come on, another fucking longbow, bro.
Close range.
Another double tap.
Level 1.
Oh yeah, I don't even have a backpack.
The ring is
I need a shirt if y'all see one.
not much time left.
There you. There's a
Got a
hat.
prowler for you if you want it.
Body shield here. Level 1.
I don't care for that. Unless we find a select fire. I don't have any bullets for it anyway. Yeah. Ooh, damn. Somebody left a blue ass bag on the ground. I'll take it.
Helmet here. Level 1.
Yeah, I just picked it up. I got a helmet, thank you.
I'm dropping an alternator.
Havoc here.
Oh, sweet. So I got a knockdown at the tree. 1 out of 5. Nice.
No. We found a gold guy backpack.
Hell yeah.
Friends, there is an extended energy magazine here. Level 1. Incoming care package. I love loot.
Storm's
Shotgun
coming.
here.
We're a little bit of a ways.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Oh,
Alright.
why does it do that? Sometimes I slid and hit the jump and it was like my head hit a ceiling. It wasn't a regular jump. That happens sometimes. It's fucking retarded. My head hits an invisible ceiling that hit the jump pad. Never happened to you
Huh.
before?
I'm not sure.
Because if I jumped over, I wouldn't have slammed back to the ground as fast.
There's a jump tower here.
Well, damn.
Mira, light ammo here. Let's go over here.
Be aware of the new kill leader.
Yeah. I'll check this.
Somebody's
shit.
shooting at me as I'm going up the balloon.
They're shooting at you? Oh.
Yeah, they're probably
unacceptable.
going to land on us. Totally unacceptable.
Ooh.
Barrel stabilizer here. Level 2.
Target spotted.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh yeah, let's keep
and
moving. We
and
gotta
there's
keep
two
moving.
about to hit the balloon. Oh yeah, we should probably just move into the circle.
At least to Joe, yeah.
And then worry about it, yeah.
Somebody, yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah. Got another one down. Fuck. Oh, I couldn't get my nade off. They killed me. He's getting his buddy up in the storm. He's getting his buddy up in the storm, Grim.
Man.
Oh.
I fucking froze out, dude. Fuck, I couldn't hear you guys until the very end. You got
Yeah,
stuck
that's the
in
only
place.
time I said anything. I didn't know you were having issues.
Are you guys dead?
Oh, what the fuck?
No?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it's not even showing you in the lobby.
Yeah, 'cause I got booted like to the home screen. It said
Oh,
server timed
oh,
out.
Damn. Man, what a bitch ass time for that to happen.
Right.
I killed the guy that killed you, shot you in the back, Joe, and then his fucking bitch ass buddy killed me and got him up. Maybe he died in the storm again. We can only hope. Yeah. Uh.
Is that what he said? Oh, damn, that's fucked up. He even, like, put emphasis on it. Jerk.
Not gonna lie, I'm pretty good at this. Okay, I do lie, but not this time.
Me too.
I know what you're looking for.
I keep forgetting to activate Beast of the Hunt to try to get kills with Beast of the Hunt. I may give up on that one. I mean, I've gotten some,
I like
but...
Beast of the Hunt. It's nice.
Oh, I'd like it too.
I would just
I do
activate
too,
it
I
whenever
just
you go
forget
into a
to-
fight if you have it.
Yeah, that's the way it should. Should be.
Like, even the Mirage Ultimate, like, I'll forget to use it, but, like, I try to use it whenever we're in, like, a fight, because usually I'll have it again by the next gunfight. It doesn't take that long to come back.
Yeah, yeah.
I fall only when the gods will it. Prove your strength before the gods.
You know the tree?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Tree. Where you guys heading? Where you heading? Ping it.
Let's go this way.
Yeah? Okay.
There's a squad going to
people are landing there
the
before me. I can't go there.
east building.
I'll go in the same building then.
fucking Mozambique.
Phoenix kit here.
That string's far. Hope you like exercise.
So people landed over there.
G7 scout here.
Oh hell yeah, I need that scout.
Barrel
Unless I find
stabilizer here. Level 1.
something here.
Gotta hop up here. Hemlock here.
And actually, I'm gonna keep this. I have energy
got a
too.
sl-
He needs energy. The energy's right here.
Let's go this way.
Grim, here's a select fine.
Oh, I have one. Thanks, though. I could use a bag.
Okay.
You want to go? Yeah, I see somebody right there. Yeah, back there.
What, on the leaf?
No, back by that building where I pinged with the red
Heard that.
shit.
New kill leader. Watch for them.
Oh, okay, okay. Oh shit.
Getting shot at.
Oh my god, these kids are good. God fucking damn, dude.
Need to recharge my making contact with enemy.
I got 3
Head down.
shots landed, but it didn't kill them.
Down two of them.
Downed another.
Somebody's coming up on the walkway.
Enemy killed. I took care of it,
Towards
don't
me?
worry.
Towards you.
Right there.
All right.
At the
Comment.
tree.
Oh man, we lost.
Where are they? You see them? You see them?
At the tree on the catwalk.
You got bamboozled. Getting shot at. Reloading. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. We wiped the squad.
Got him.
Body shield here.
Nice.
Squad wide.
Oh, here's somebody else on the catwalk
Rings
above me.
closing in 1. Well, not very.
Just gotta patch myself up.
You need shields, Joe? Ah, son of a bitch! I didn't realize they were there. I thought they were somewhere else. Fuck. God damn
45
it.
seconds. Recharging my shields.
Son of a bitch.
Go Joe. Go Joe.
Got our squad mate's banner.
Oh, he's coming at you, Joe.
Setting a
Yeah, I hear footsteps.
portal placed.
I may win this thing today. Keep rooting for me.
I've done that shit.
Level 3.
It's like in the action movies when you see the motherfuckers running and the bullets are right behind them hitting the ground. I've done that same
Yeah.
shit.
I'll be right back.
Alrighty.
All right.
I've got everything we need.
I just hope I don't have to fight with that smiling robot. I'm just kidding. He's fine. Everyone's fine.
I am prepared for the fight.
champion.
You better not rock with me.
Alright, alright, alright. We're going to hell, boys. Alright, I'm landing at the place right behind here, so I'm gonna go through this crack and hook right. That's what she said. My boots have been on, yeah. Definitely hooked wrong that time that the blood came out and shit. Yep. Was the hepatitis already there? I don't know.
Body shield here. Level 2. Backpack here. Knockdown shield
Fuck
here.
around and get
Level
AIDS
1.
or something. I'm not saying I'm got it, but if I got it, you got it.
First blood.
ODP. Oh, you gonna do a little teabag move before you pop, kid? Is that what you gonna do? You a bad man, huh? Got fucked up.
Dropping devotion and some energy out here.
You're only ever
Bag that hoe.
from chilling true crime to the hottest
Alright,
takes
alright.
in news, pop culture.
Yeah. We don't teabag, we
Were they all
potato
dead?
sack, you
You made the right
motherfuckers.
choices.
Noise. Gangsta.
This time it's us giving them an early exit, you bitches.
Yeah.
We should go. Body shield here. Level 1. Patching myself up.
I have no health. Oh, you know what? I do have syringes. Oh, here's something here. I got. Oh, I didn't. I don't have syringes. I meant King's kit. That's what I have. But I just found some syringes in that thing.
One sec, healing up. Taking a moment to heal. All Father, give me sight.
Oh, I heard some gunfire. I need some ammo bad. If anybody has any light or sees any. Oh, I see some. I see some.
Ah, fuck.
Heavy
It
ammo
paused me in place and I couldn't hear you guys. I thought I fucking got whatever the fuck I said earlier. Late shit. Timeout. Whatever.
Right, whatever.
Yeah. Whatever that weird shit was. Fuck. I really thought I got booted. I was about to like get real.
Last thing I heard
angry.
from you was hepatitis. I don't even know.
Sounds about right.
Gotta hop up. Extended heavy mag here. Level 2.
The ring is distant. Trust the winds.
Are you hearing noises?
Hell
The
yeah.
Portalius.
Placing a portal.
The ring is distant. Time is short. New kill leader. Soon to be me.
Well, thanks for thinking of us.
Yeah. Joe, I just read you like anime, right? I just read an anime-related comment that I don't understand, and I was wondering if you've ever heard of this term, clopping, C-L-O-P-P-I-N-G.
Rings coming.
Clotting,
Okay.
like what your blood does? when
No,
you-
clopping, like a horse goes clip clop, C-L-O-P-P-I-N-G.
Oh,
I don't know what that means, but
That's
I
new
asked
to
the
me.
person who put the comment, I was like, I don't want to know what this means, but I want to know what this means, you know. Yeah. I assume it's tentacle related, but
It's related to tentacles? Obviously. Nothing
tentacles
else
is in my
would make
vagina.
sense.
Care package coming in.
This shit does not look looted from what I can
Oh,
tell.
do you want this
Goddamn.
Spitfire? You can have it.
Come peep this
You
shit.
want that 301 there?
Alright, I'll
So
just
it's
audio.
19 gigs.
Alright. Phoenix kit, blue sniper stock, light ammo, 45, blue heavy clip. Energy ammo havoc. That's everything in here. You can skip it if you don't need anything. These bins are open though.
Sid, what'd you say, man?
It's 19
There might
gigabytes.
be somebody in this building. I can't
Oh,
hear
okay.
good enough.
Yeah.
Oh, you can
I'm
climb this
downloading
cliff
right
face,
now.
Joe. Yeah,
Clip
I didn't know you
face?
could do that. Yeah, clip face, yeah. Oh, clip.
Good old clit face.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
Hey.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Use that.
I don't know. Should I go for a flatline? I'm kind of liking the Spitfire. That's what I used the last game.
Select fire.
Yeah, I don't-
I'm
it's
gonna
hard
leave
to
that
say,
flatline.
man. I get torn between those two sometime too.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the flatline does more immediate damage, and that's usually why I like it. But the Spitfire is a little steadier, and also one of the tricks
Yeah.
I like to pull on people is the old act like, because you got a big ass clip, I'll act like I ran out of ammo and stop shooting, so then they pop out or wherever they are, and then like that's what I did to kill the third guy in the last thing. I only had like 9 bullets
idea.
left, but I just acted like I was out of bullets. They popped back out, and I was like, boom, boom, boom. Goner.
Keeping an eye on that spot over there.
Okay. I'm waiting on you guys. Damn. If you see a better shirt, Warner Brother.
You feeling left out, Joe?
Yeah, yeah. It's
Heavy
old
ammo here.
hot tea shit.
Optics here. Close range. Extended heavy mag here.
Extended light mag here. Level 1.
I don't think anybody needs a white heavy mag. I feel like I pinged like a couple blue ones, right?
Might be something good
Shield
there.
cell right there. I missed it. So you're gonna go that away or that away? No.
Thermite grenade
I'm
here.
gonna start peeping shit from up top here. 1 minute. Oh shit, moves in. Oh, there's a couple. I might have seen people. I don't know because I'm new to bins here.
Level 3. Range close. 45 seconds.
Come on, cool guy shirt.
Standard stock here. Level 1.
Nice charge rifling. Yeah, there's nothing cool here but like light ammo.
I'm angry at the game right now that I'm still negative, even though it's not the game's fault. But
Knocking on the door.
Yeah,
or maybe it
like
is the
that
game's
game,
fault.
The last game, I think I was only positive like 6 points or something.
And you had like multiple kills, right?
Yeah. Felt like that was. I was like, what? I just felt like I would have more.
That thing hurts.
Yeah.
I think I'm hearing people. Not sure.
Here's a blue stock.
Maybe it was you guys. I don't know.
Heads up. Care package coming in.
Close range. Extended heavy mag here. Level 2.
Oh shit! The walls are coming. We really have to go into the circle.
All right. Yeah, we're right next to the ring.
Go bazoomba. Bamboo.
we're good. You want to go up top, check it out?
Show.
There's people over there.
Okay.
Top floor, second to top floor. Yeah, they know we're here, I think.
You're being aimed at. Someone's got a shot on me pretty short.
Somebody's down there. There's another squad down there.
Oh yeah, coming across the street.
Maybe we just let them fight each other. If we back off, these two squads will fight each other.
Okay, okay, I'm backing up.
They're underneath.
Oh shit, somebody's right out. Oh, that's a goddamn decoy. Fuck! Fuck! God damn, I get sick of that shit.
Where you at? Down on the ground?
Yeah, but there's a guy firing at me from right there.
I'm
He's
coming
on the
down.
second floor of the... Yeah, I'm trying to hide in a corner here. I'm hiding in a corner.
Oh god.
Somebody's coming to you. Right around me. Somebody is walking right around me. Oh,
Yeah, it was
shit.
a full squad right there.
Yeah, it might have been 2 squads moving in. Oh, you said it was because they were going to fight each other or whatever. Yes. I don't know sometimes how I get fucking, like, when I fired at that decoy, I don't even know where the fucking fire was coming from, and it just cut me down.
What happened?
I
Did
know
you fall off the building? You fall off the roof? What happened? I wasn't watching.
I was, when you said move back and let them fight each other, I was like, he's right. So I started moving back, but that's that building where you can't go from the under construction part. I mean, the part with like all the, you know, where it's just
Oh,
girders
you
and
dropped
shit.
off of the roof part down on the
I started
construction
advancing
site
on
part.
the party, and
okay.
yeah, and then you're like move back, and I thought you were, and you were right, but I mean, I couldn't.
Because the zip
just
line goes
crawl-
to the construction part. So if they were going to fight, and they were always shooting at each other, figured if we just left them alone.
No, yeah, you
they'd
were right.
handle
I
it,
was
you
just,
know.
I was trying to run back, and like, so I get back to the outside of the building, and see a decoy and shoot at it, and I don't even know where I got shot from, but he cut me down in a fucking second. I mean, I don't even know what fucking gun he. Some of those guys are so good with an automatic gun at distance, it seems impossible. Maybe he had a scope and a barrel stabilizer, you know, but it's like when you don't have that shit on your gun, you're like, no fucking way he had that shit, you know.
Impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Hear about that one Fortnite YouTuber?
Yeah, that little cheating bitch.
Yeah, he got caught using aimbots, not in competition, but like, you know, on regular.
Yeah,
shit.
just playing. Yeah.
And he got a ban for life. He's never allowed at any Fortnite events ever for life. Banned for life. And he's all crying like, "Oh, my life is ruined. It's not fair." But it's like, it wasn't even in a competition. Yeah, but it's like, that's your fucking fault. Like, just because it wasn't in competition, like, you ruin the game for how many people on a regular basis every day because they come up against a cheater. Yeah. So I don't feel bad for him. I don't feel bad for him. Fuck him.
3 words: win and win again.
Hey, let's go already.
Apparently they have a zero tolerance cheating policy. Yeah, because if you think about it, how many people you think probably stop playing it because they'd get so far and then come to some dude who just, you know, mowed them down from a million miles away and it was just unfair and they're like, fuck this game, I don't even want to play anymore. So I was like, fuck 'em, dude. I don't think there's cheats on Xbox like there's on computer, right? As far as I know. I think it's possible, but it's a lot easier to do on computer, right? Oh shit! I didn't get the gun. I'm coming over here. Oh, you guys are over here too. Nice. Okay.
Here's a Havoc and an alternator.
Yeah, you better hop off, bitch.
Grim, I'm with you. I'm
All right,
looking
I'm
for
gonna
these
go. Oh,
fools.
who's over here? I hopped off to check this shit out. Cause what you said was a Havoc. Or what you said?
Yeah, upstairs, Havoc and an alternator. And there's a Havoc downstairs and like a 2020.
Attention. First blood.
If you see a shirt, I could use it.
Bunch of shotgun ammo here. Alright, where you guys want to go? See somebody running back there. You go creep
Okay,
on
you
them?
want to? Let's all get together.
Did you just slide? Yeah. I was gonna guess. There's a helmet here. 2 helmets.
I'm going
Joe?
McConaughey here, no shirt.
Double tap. Hey, you sound like dirt. There's like 3 people in here. There's a bunch of them.
Shit. I'm coming.
Yeah.
Whoa, what just happened?
Wait, there's some other hoes. There's like 2
Yep.
spots here. Oh, right here. Oh, 2 more people? God damn.
Oh, I got killed in there. Hey, one of these dudes is almost dead, Joe, and there's one more dude that's not dead. He said, no, they're on you. They're on you.
Oh, the 3rd guy just ran in. Oh. I'm gonna bounce away, if that helps. That didn't help.
Oh, they're both together. Good try. I mean, there were 2 dudes. 2 dudes on you, dudes on both sides. It was a sausage party.
Rage! That's what happened.
Banana fists.
Oh, right back. Alright.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
Ahead, we talk of victory and slaughter. The ring isn't really complex, but it can be
Yeah,
a little
yeah.
complicated.
It sucks getting up on not enough sleep.
This is gonna be a good fight.
This is your champion.
Get ready. I'm coming for you, friend.
Follow me.
Ooh.
Let's land here.
You were tough, friend.
Loud and clear.
With more than 450,000 podcasts
Enough
on
rounds
Spotify,
allowed. We
you're
drop.
only ever a tap away from your new favorite show. From chilling true crime.
That would be the
to
best
high-stakes
way, I
news,
think.
pop culture, and sports. There's something for everyone.
If you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
I'm out of bullets. I didn't get the ammo.
Yeah, no, I hate that saying. How the fuck you gonna just do what you love? I mean,
Oh, and this is looted?
oh my
Wow.
god damn. That my god, dude, how did that fucking guy one-shot me?
Oh dang, it's not us.
What? Oh my gosh. This guy somehow, all I saw on my screen was one shot, but during that one shot, I was shot for
This robot's
21
almost
by
dead.
45,
Shoot him. Oh, there's
2
another
hits
squad.
for
Yeah, let's go together.
102 by scout rifle.
There.
Yeah, that was
You were the one with the peacekeeper, right? And it was
You're
just
just-
not doing its job, right?
You're just talking based on pure reflex right now. You're actually dead. It's like-
Yeah.
oh shit. Yeah, I understand.
So,
That
yeah.
pissed me off so bad. 8? Yeah, there it is. That's the fucking.
Oh.
You guys keep saying this, and I'm pretty sure I've seen the same shit happen to me.
Yeah, it doesn't
What I
look that
saw
way,
on my
for
screen
sure.
just doesn't. Yeah. So it's like it kind of makes you question your career damage and shit too. It's like that's probably not even right.
Yeah. Well, I do know that in the very beginning, when they came out with the new ranking system, everything that happened up till there, like, disappeared. Like, I know mine's not accurate. Mine says, let's see, highest damage 1583, and I know I broke 17. I was 18. Let's see, highest kills 9. Yeah, I definitely did more than that before. I think it was like 12 or so. So. Yeah, I remember being in there.
I guess it would be nice if I could touch your body. I know that
Yeah.
nobody has got a body like me.
Is it different for every character? Maybe you're playing a different character. Maybe the lifetime does the lifetime damage? Oh no, because lifetime damage dealt 1.3 and Mirage is 1.08. So for damage dealt. So I guess that has to be all your characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know if your mic was cutting in now. I wasn't sure what was happening now.
Some
Smoking copper pipes. Apparently that can give you a lockjaw. And you were gone at the same time. Oh, you're making me feel like I gotta yawn. Stop it. Stop it. Shall not pass.
Oh, I was
Me?
joking around. You
That
were
was you.
saying tomorrow something, and I was just like gonna make some jumbled up words, like joking around. Yeah, I was gonna mix up what you were saying. I'm gonna remix that.
Remix.
Wah, wah, wah,
Drinks.
wah. Okay. I might look at it, but I think to myself, like, I almost
Oh, you
know
got
I'm
charge
not
rifle,
going
but
to
I
be able
mean-
to give it the time, so I don't know if I'll even start. You know. I mean, I'd probably only be able to play on the weekends, like, and that just, you know, how I going to be max level like that? Oh shit, Grim, I'm coming.
Motherfucker. God damn. Alright.
What'd you? Oh, start streaming, you say? When you find streaming success, that might inspire me to try it in my part time and see if I can then quit the job. or when I begin living with a woman that makes good money.
She can pay the bills.
And I don't have to, just in case, you know. Yeah. Oh, that's Grimm's territory, man. You guys got to date the genetic clones. Childhood friends dating the clones.
I mean, hey, she's working for Joe. She has a twin.
Just joking. Right. Well, that's true. Just ask a 12-year-old black belt. Yeah.
And I could still beat up a 12-year-old black belt, though.
Yeah, I'd kick him in his little nuts.
Oh.
He don't even have to suck him up.
It's empty scrotum.
Oh, that's gross.
Oh. Oh, man.
Just... Oh, gross. That's hilarious. Empty pelvic sack. That's my next Xbox Live handle, is empty pelvic sack. Oh shit.
Empty pelvic sack. I'm got that bitch right there.
Alright, Joe, we'll see you tomorrow and tell us how the beta is. You know,
Yeah,
I'm
mate.
not going to rule out that I'll boot it up and look at it, but I just don't have the time right now. It might be awesome, though. I might get addicted to it if I do look at it. I don't know. I could feel blessed.
I got jumped. Behind you. Oh, God.
Every time, every time.
That's what the priest said. All right, Joe.
See you, Joe. Have a good night.
I'll see you, man.
See if this kid gets us up. STHE.